Hello, we're going to be starting soon. We're just having some technical difficulties. Is there anything? I'm going to steal this Maria. Okay, no worries. Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience while we resolve some technical difficulties. Patricia, if you could go to the next slide, please. I'm going to quickly run through some overviews and announcements. So just like yesterday, all of our presentations today will be 8 minutes with 4 minutes for questions afterwards. And all of the presentations today will be recorded and available online on our website afterwards. We're going to be starting with session 3 for tackling derelict fishing gear and move on to session 4, action through alliances. And we'll take a short break before starting some more sessions before lunch. Patricia, can you go back one real quick? And after lunch, we'll be meeting in the Science Center for some more networking sessions. Let's move on to session 3 real quick. Thank you.
Good morning, all. Thanks for attending today's event. We are going to kick off session 3, tackling fishing gear, innovations, and strategies for a cleaner marine environment. And in this session, we have 5 speakers. Again, each speaker will have 8 minutes to present, and we'll do the Q&A for about 4 minutes following the presentations. First up, we have Joseph Barnes, who will be discussing From Learning to Willing to Doing, a collaborative approach to implementing the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan. Thank you.
Morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Barnes, and I will be presenting on my project called From Learning to Willing to Doing, a collaborative approach to implementing the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan. Next slide. So this project is run out of Old Dominion University in Norfolk and Portsmouth, Virginia. And it focuses on this area that's surrounded by the Elizabeth River and James and Lafayette Rivers, which are major industrial and working rivers in the area that flow into the Chesapeake Bay and ultimately into the Atlantic Ocean. So implementing the Virginia Marine Debris Reduction Plan at the local scale here is impactful for these larger water bodies. Next slide, please. So the reduction plan was a statewide initiative developed with multi-sectoral approaches and input, meaning that anyone who needed to be involved in the process of marine debris reduction was. It also means that implementing it across the state at local levels also requires that same whole of community approach. So my team in Norfolk and Portsmouth is made up of educational institutions, nonprofits, businesses, and state agencies to again get that same level of collaboration. The reduction plan has 4 goals to understand, mitigate, and prevent the effects of consumer debris, derelict fishing gear, microfibers and plastics, and abandoned and derelict vessels. We focus mostly on goals 2 and 4, the derelict fishing gear and abandoned and derelict vessels, but also kind of as a rallying point to talk about marine debris and get the awareness out there. Next slide, please. Our project team consists of people from Old Dominion University and Virginia Sea Grant. I'm the project coordinator. I just started on this project 4 months ago, so I will be speaking about what's been done since then and what we hope to continue for the next year. We also have advisory partners in multiple local nonprofits and a state agency in Virginia. Next slide, please. So the title of the project, From Learning to Willing to Doing, refers to the process of engaging community members and stakeholders, where the first step is education, getting the resources out there and raising awareness and increasing scientific literacy around marine debris topics. Once people are aware of the issue, then you can go on to the direct engagement, things like cleanups or recycling initiatives, direct actions that individuals can take in their community. And all of that culminates in a social marketing campaign to have lasting behavioral change effects at the local scale. Next slide, please. The project has 4 goals. The first is to create a robust and diverse network of stakeholders, a multi-sectoral approach to implementing the reduction plan locally. We also want to increase literacy about marine debris issues, which will in turn increase the Virginia Sea Grant capacity in marine debris efforts. And we also want to create an online hub to centralize a lot of marine debris resources across the state of Virginia into one easy to read location. Next slide, please. And we did that. So we built a website centralizing a lot of resources across sectors, just taking information from our nonprofit, state agency partners, and everyone else. There's information on what marine debris is, what abandoned vessels are, what derelict fishing gear is, what you can do about it. There's resources for different sectors if you are an environmental educator or an advocate, and then actions for different sectors involved in marine debris and what they can do in those specific sectors as well. Next slide. We're also doing a lot of community engagement and youth education. And we've done a lot of tabling events, things like community science fairs and art shows. The middle picture shows an example of what our table looks like at these events. There's resources from all of our partners with information about plastic pollution, information about recycling guidelines in the 7 cities and Hampton Roads. We have some giveaways and metal straws, flyers from our partners. So already it's a big collaborative effort there. The picture on the left is my favorite activity we do at these events. It's a diverted trash marine debris mermaid mural. Mermaids are kind of Norfolk's mascot, so it's an applicable way for students to come over and build an art project and see all the ways they come into contact with plastic in their daily life and how it could become marine debris. And we've also developed a roundtable discussion for interested classrooms to discuss marine debris from that multi-sectoral approach, raising awareness and getting them to talk about different ideas and ways that people's lives and livelihoods interact with marine debris. Next slide. One of our biggest activities so far has been the Water Wellness Watch, which from that flyer you can see had so many partnerships, but it was, on my end, it was a coastal cleanup during the King Tide flooding event in Norfolk. And it was a way to bring people out in real time to see the effects of flooding events and sea level rise and marine debris, how people come in contact with it, with floodwaters, how far up things are washing ashore, and seeing that real time impact. Next slide. We have some things in the works. One of them is updating a public abandoned vessel survey report form with the Virginia State Agency. So people can, if they find an abandoned vessel just out in the wild, they can fill out a Google form. It'll populate onto this map and go to the state, so we're aware of where the abandoned vessels are. And we're making that more user-friendly and more seamless in the back end for us. We're also collaborating with some organizations across Virginia who are doing the actual vessel removal. And while on my end, we will not be doing the removals, we'll be talking about it, educating the public, informing them what's going on, and getting people on board with those efforts. And then the picture on the right are these blue boat drones that are in the works. We are going to equip them with side scan sonar to go out in the rivers and map the seafloor to look for derelict fishing gear, fish like lobster pots, or abandoned vessels that have been submerged. Next slide. So to summarize, we have built up that marine debris coalition. That is our core partners and the community partnerships that we're continuing to build as we go out into our community in Hampton Roads, Norfolk, and Portsmouth. We've done a lot of community engagement through tabling and cleanup events, and we built that online marine debris resource hub. Through all of that, we have collaborated with 33 individuals across 13 organizations and have reached over 500 participants so far. In progress is our youth education component, going out into classrooms. We're partnering with an environmental science program, some Surfrider chapters. And the idea there is that educating students, next generation, means that they will be less likely to abandon a vessel, for example, or just more likely to be involved in marine debris reduction efforts. We also want to do an ongoing cleanup series with our partners. We're working on that abandoned vessel inventory, removals, and the drone ADV abandoned vessel detection. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So thank you to our supporters and partners. It's been a really fun activity and project to work on, seeing how everyone is involved in the marine debris sphere and how they interact with everyone else and seeing all the resources available. So thank you for your time, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
You raise your hand again?
Thanks, it's really interesting to hear about. I'm wondering if you have heard from people as you're doing your outreach. Where I am, there's a diving community that appreciates having sunken vessels to dive, and I wonder if you hear that from any sort of scuba diving community, that you're taking away something that they would like to go see.
I haven't heard that from that specific community, but a question I get asked sometimes is, like, don't these submerged vessels create habitat or like a reef? My answer to that is that there are certain cases where that can happen, but the vessels that are lost here still have oils in them. They still are polluting from like the paint chips microplastics. They're still a navigational hazard because it's such a working river. So that's my response to that question, is that it's still important to get those vessels out just for the safety of other boats and environmental health.
It's awesome to hear that you're working with Surfrider. We work with Surfrider Massachusetts and Cape and Islands. To your community beach cleanup, I didn't know if you had heard of the Corona USA Protect Your Beaches program that they've got running on, and it's administered through Oceanic Global. They provide logistical and financial support for the administration and implementation of community beach cleanups, as well as large-scale cleanups. So if you're looking for additional funding for like staff, community beach cleanup level, so it's not like tens of thousands of dollars, that's something I would suggest to reach out to, because they have a goal of like 1 million pounds and 100 beaches by 2025. So they're super engaged and looking to get involved, especially with partners like Surfrider.
That's awesome. Can we touch base later? I would write that down, but I was nervous and forgot a pen. So
The organization was Surfrider. Corona,
Yeah, just protect our beaches.
Corona USA, and Surfrider. Do we have any more questions? Yes.
Hi, I was wondering how you track engagement with your resource hub, if it's like analytics on the website or you send out a survey to see how people are using it.
Yeah, so far it's just been analytics. So I just log in the back end, and I can see the clicks and engagement on each page of the website, which is really cool.
At one point you mentioned, and I'm sorry, I forget which project in particular, but you mentioned behavior change. So I would like to know how exactly you are measuring that.
I don't think that's being really measured at this time, but we're getting the resources out there to have that effect. One of the biggest examples I can think of is there's a whole section on the website that links to recycling guidelines in each individual city, because Hampton Roads is 7 cities right next to each other, and they all have different ways of recycling, different guidelines for that. So if people can learn to recycle correctly in their own homes, then that can also reduce marine debris, reduce contamination.
So you're not doing like a before or after where you've implemented some kind of campaign, and then after the campaign, you're tracking. So you're not actually doing some kind of before or after project where you've implemented some sort of whatever it is, like trying to replace plastic bags somewhere and tracking behavior change afterwards?
Not at this moment. It's a pretty new project, so I can consider that for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Joseph. That's all the time we have for questions.
Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Keri Kaczor. She will be talking about reducing derelict fishing gear in the Gulf of Maine, educating and empowering boaters to be a part of the solution.
Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. It's nice to spend some time with some old friends and meet some new ones and to learn about you and all your great work. So it's a pleasure to be here. As you heard, I'm Keri Kaczor. I'm with Maine Sea Grant. Next slide, please. Oops, I went too quickly. I am a principal investigator for one of our marine debris community coalition grants. And on the first slide, I listed Stacy Kiefer, who's our co-PI in this adventure, and she's with the Maine Marine Trades Association. She's a good egg. She's a wonderful collaborator. She's a real driver behind this initiative. So although I'm here representing the project, I have to give out a shout out to Stacy and all her great work. As you heard yesterday, Maine Sea Grant, we have like a 3-legged stool, right? Extension, research, education. We do a lot of engagement at the community level. I'm not going to read this slide, but these are our focus areas. And thanks to this funding, marine debris is a relatively new program area for us. So it's been a real delight. We were successful in 3 competitions in that first round. You heard a little bit from Buzz yesterday, one of our projects. You'll hear from Harsha, Dr. Harsha James, and others this afternoon. And then this one is sort of the smaller of the initiatives focused on our cruising boating community. Next slide, please. So you might have heard me say this yesterday, clearly defining what, marine debris is. It's human sourced. We sourced it and it's trash in our waterways and oceans and it doesn't belong there. Removal is challenging. I feel like you probably already know this, but once it's in that ecosystem, it's very hard to remove. And in some cases, like microplastics, it never really goes away. Next slide, please. We have a lot of coastline in Maine and not a lot of people, not a lot of capacity to monitor that shoreline and clean it up. And so, boaters and others contribute to this marine debris It has a lot of ecosystem impacts, and I could take all day to talk about those, but it's also a loss to our fishing community because it's lost gear, etc. at sea. Next slide. So thanks to the Rosalia project and others that are actually out there in the Gulf of Maine, going to these remote islands and shorelines and hauling this trash off of it, we have some data. I know they have some new data coming out from their 2024 season. I think, help me out, Buzz, I think it was 43% of what they hauled this past summer was fishing related debris. But here's just some data to show what they're finding. This year, actually, the buoys and floats took the cake. That was a #1 item, styrofoam buoys and floats that they were moving off of these shoreline areas. Next slide, please. Foam fragments, plastic, you know, the typical ugly list of the things that they're pulling off of these islands and communities. Next slide. So it's tricky because, sorry Buzz, I keep putting you on the spot, but how much does it cost to get a dump trash bag on Matinicus Island? Yeah, how much does one bag cost? Do you guess?
And you put me on the spot, I think $50 we collect a bunch of them.
Yeah, so it's costly, it's complicated to haul these things off of these shoreline areas, out of the water, sparsely populated, and then we have nesting birds and other wildlife that get entangled and caught up in these things as well. Next slide, please. So of course our funding came from BIL and IRA, and we formed a community action coalition, which really jived well with Maine Sea Grant because, like all Sea Grant programs, everything we do is in collaboration. Next slide. And here's our core partners. I'm not going to read this, but we have actually a larger coalition, but this is sort of the core group involved in this initiative. Next slide. So most of our work is centered around this communication product, and it's not perfect. And we're really trying hard to not do that dastardly finger pointing that tends to happen, right? We're all involved. We all have a role to play in sourcing marine debris. I feel like we all have a responsibility for addressing the issue, but we all love Maine waters. Who's been to Maine? Who loves Maine? Yay, me too. So not to be silly, but we're trying to keep it light. We're trying to keep it like we're all in this together. We all have this role. And that here are a few things that you can do. Now, these are signs that are located, they're metal signs at public access points where you may launch your boat, in marinas, town offices where you may register your boat trailer and the like. I have a show and tell if you want to touch it, feel it, hang out with it a little bit. But you can only do so much with signs. And so we have a QR code that takes you to the Love Maine Waters website where it's sort of choose your own adventure. How far down this rabbit hole do you want to go as far as learning about what marine debris is, what are the primary sources, etc. And we want to reshape that social narrative. Next slide, please. I gotta speed it up here. So, if you don't mind going back. So here are some of the outlets that we've been tapping into. We just had a great radio show at the end of September. You can find it online at WERU Coastal Community Coastal Conversations. We're working on videos from people out on the water, fishermen, what they're observing out there, what they're doing about it, why they care about the issue. I talked about the website. Next slide, please. We launched a social media campaigns. We're breaking that primary communication product into sections and literally saying, you know, as you're navigating your boat, this is the tricky toggle system. On the left there, it looks like sort of a dirty marshmallow. It's really hard to see. That's a small buoy. You've got a toggle just under the water line. It's very hard to see. And then you've got your, iconic lobster buoy. We're saying, don't go that way, go this way. It's not only a source of marine debris in the Gulf of Maine, but it's a safety hazard. If that gets entangled around your system, it could throw you. And so organizations like CETO, sort of the AAA of the sea, they are often, helping people that have run over these lines, but it really is a major safety hazard. I don't want to get myself in trouble, but some of our recreational cruisers, tourists that visit Maine in the summertime, they just run with cutters on their boat because there's so many lines in the water. But here's Love Maine Waters and some of the information opportunities. Next slide, please. Here's some more examples, if you don't mind just going through the next one. So we're trying to be really pointed and like, hey, here's the message. Here's some of the publications that we've been featured in. Stacy's been very masterful in getting there. And then last slide is some lessons learned. Humor goes a long way. This is a Farrah Fawcett vintage shampoo bottle that was found. If you're doing social media, that narrative needs to be managed very carefully. And then I'll leave it at that because I am out of time. Sorry about that. And then the last slide is just a thank you and questions.
To answer your question, it was 20% of the marine debris that they picked up was lobster traps.
Oh, it's just lobster traps, yeah. And then I think 43% total from just fishing and other. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah.
Great, thanks, Buzz. Hot off the press.
So I have a question. I was just in Maine early September, mid-September, my first time there, loved it. But noticed in all the gift shops, get your lobster buoy. And I'm just curious, this seems like a really good opportunity to work with local artists or even community groups to actually market the lobster buoys that you're getting from your cleanups. Because the ones that were in the gift shops look like they were brand new and just painted. The same with the lovely fishing line doormats they just look like brand new polypropylene line. So I think might be a missed opportunity there. I mean, maybe not. Maybe tourists want brand new painted buoys, but it seems like a real opportunity to get the word out there better. So just a thought.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Some of those crafty buoys that you see are intentionally sort of agnostic. I don't know what the word is, but you don't want to tie necessarily to the fishermen themselves. So that could be something that could be a little sensitive because they each have their own individual marking for their buoys. But I love that idea. And there are organizations that are creating new and innovative things out of old gear and equipment, and especially the mats format. So that's already being done. Does anyone know off the top of their head what company that is that are making the rope mats?
It's Maine Trades.
Company, I believe. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Maine Trades Company, and we do send a lot of our used rope to those companies. There's several of them that are doing that, and they wash the rope, and it makes it look almost brand new. So you can get the older version, and you can get the brand new stuff.
Travis Williams, USC, thanks for the talk. I'm interested in these buoys, and I'm curious if you know anything about the material makeup of those products. How much is polystyrene, polyurethane, or other engineering polymers and phenolics that we might be able to adapt those as feedstocks for upgrading?
Oh, really interesting. This is not my cup of tea, but Buzz may know. I mean, he's the man that's breaking these things down and turning traps to treasure.
Yeah, I believe they're polystyrene, so I can get you that information later. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are some real trailblazers and innovators that are using like micro buoys and plastic free, especially sea farms are moving towards that. Yeah, it's exciting.
We have time for one more quick question. Yes.
Hi, thank you. This work is really awesome. I'm just curious, do you have an issue in Maine with people going to the islands and, having like picnics in the summer and leaving trash behind? And if so, have you seen a difference after this campaign?
Oh, that's a great question. And, all of our islands are carry in, carry out. And even though many of them are actually privately owned, but there's easements for public access, which is pretty special, I think that there's just sort of a golden rule. I haven't moved, I don't know, Buzz, if you can even speak to this, but I haven't seen much contribution or heard of anything documented from picnicking. It's often things that are just coming in and washing up on the shoreline, not necessarily hauled out there for like a day experience, but great question.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the next
Thank you.
Awesome, thanks all. Next up, we have Kirstin Meyer-Kaiser, who will be talking about the prevention, education, and removal of marine debris from underwater cultural heritage.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here. I want to start by acknowledging that this project is a large collaboration between multiple organizations and multiple individuals. As the lead PI, I'm stationed at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, but we're working very, very closely with Hui Sea Grant. We also have a partnership with the Center for Coastal Studies, which is in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And our project engages a range of stakeholders and marine environmental users across Massachusetts. Next slide, please. So this is a relatively new project. Our start date was just in September this year. So I want to give a little bit of background of A, why we care about underwater cultural heritage, and B, why we decided to focus on that. So if you take a time machine back to 2019, we had a research project on shipwrecks in Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary. And I should clarify, when I say underwater cultural heritage, I'm referring to sunken ships, sunken planes, Paleolithic middens, breakwalls, lighthouses, all of the remains of human history at sea. So we were looking at 3 shipwrecks, the steamship Portland, which sank in 1898, 2 coal schooners that collided in 1902, and then an unidentified coal schooner. And we did a lot of really great research. We reached classrooms with telepresence during COVID. It was a great project. But one of the things that came out of that research was the dawning realization that one of the primary threats to our heritage at sea in Massachusetts is actually marine debris. You might be familiar with some of the fisheries we have in Massachusetts. We have scallops, we have cod, we have lobster. And so all of that gear has the tendency to get tangled on shipwrecks. Sure. And as you can see here from AIS data, there's actually a tendency for some fishermen to specifically target shipwrecks. Each of those yellow points on this map represents one of the wrecks in Stellwagen, and the tracks that you see are where the fishing vessels have gone. So obviously every shipwreck functions as an unplanned artificial reef, so there tend to be dense fish communities around them, and some fishermen will specifically target those. Next slide, please. So our project has 3 major components. First is prevention. This involves a lot of stakeholder engagement and collaborative development of policies that might prevent future entanglements on shipwrecks. Second is education, and we're approaching this at the K-12 level and at the public level, and also removal. And that removal objective is led by my co-PI, Robin Littlefield. He's a research engineer at Hui, and basically we're building a robot. It's going to be cool. Next slide, please. So starting with the prevention, the stakeholder engagement, I've highlighted some of our key stakeholders here. The objective is to treat fishermen as experts. Let's be perfectly honest. Any commercial fisherman spends way more time at sea than me. They know what they're looking at. They know where the shipwrecks are. And it is a large challenge to build up the trust with a commercial fisherman to get them to give you their coordinates of what they call hangs. These are places where nets have been lost before, gotten hung up on the seafloor. So we're in the process of building that trust, and actually building on momentum from several previous projects. One of the partners in this current project, Calvin Myers, has long-standing relationships with many commercial fisheries, and that's proving to be a great advantage for us. We're planning roundtable discussions that will start this winter in order to bring fishermen to the table along with state and federal level management agencies, the Massachusetts Environmental Police, also indigenous communities, and have that discussion of why do hangs happen and how can we prevent them in the future. I can tell you based on one conversation I had on a commercial fishing vessel, I actually had to go out for a separate project with a scallop fisherman, and I asked his opinion on how do we prevent this. His answer was, I'm gonna call it the Beyonce answer, put a buoy on it. So I'm really excited to see what other ideas come out of those conversations. Next slide. Our public education. So K-12 level is building on all of the momentum from Hui Sea Grant. Grace Simpkins is regularly in classrooms around Massachusetts, and we're excited to develop those partnerships. As far as the general public goes, I want to call out our partnership with Sound Explorations. This is a nonprofit that uses music to explain and teach scientific concepts. The objective here is to reach either neurodivergent or blind or low vision people who might not otherwise have access or, equal access, let's say, to some educational resources. The QR code at the bottom there is a project that we did as part of that Stellwagen telepresence project back in 2019-2020. That's a video that uses music to portray what lives on a shipwreck over time. And so the goal here is to turn that foundation into a public exhibit specifically focused on marine debris, because we know the marine debris is getting entangled on the shipwrecks, and we know that it's having impacts on biodiversity. Next slide, please. Finally, our removal objective. This is led by, like I said, research engineer Robert Littlefield, and using some of the components that already exist in the Blue Robotics ecosystem. Some of you might be familiar with that. It's relatively low cost, relatively user-friendly, kind of build out your own robot. We are aiming to create an intuitive, low-cost, mobile robotic system specifically designed for removal of marine debris from a complex shipwreck environment. There are multiple challenges here. First of all, you don't want to get the robot tangled. Second of all, you don't want to have some disaster where you have a big ball of net come to the surface. And so having that nimble, intuitive operation is going to be absolutely key here. Robin has made some progress so far. His team actually went into one of our large test tanks at Hui, and you can see some of the photos from that test on the right here. They were able to approach and grab and handle a net in the tank with very little difficulty. Next slide. And so the kind of holy grail for this particular objective is using what we already know about the geometry of net entanglements on shipwrecks in Massachusetts to approach this in the real world. Again, partnering with fishermen, taking that robotic system out on a fishing vessel, going to some of their hang numbers, and removing those nets. I've put up this is the steamship Portland. I don't know if we'll get to that with this project. It's really deep, it's really fast current, it's really challenging, but the goal is to have some test cases around Massachusetts where we can demonstrate the utility of the system and actually make some progress removing nets from shipwrecks. With that, I will be happy to take any questions that you might have. I think I have one more question slide. Thank you very much.
Kirstin, really great talk. I'm reminded there was a publication that was put together that used to be able to get, I think, the Cape May fishing station. Some of these, it was called the Masters Hang Log, and it was a compilation from a fisherman who had gone around and spent time going to each of the boats. The coordinates were all largely still Loran coordinates. A lot of these draggers, the scallopers will have that. So that might be something to see if you can get a copy of. I was just trying to see if
scout buddy of mine, had a copy still of it. And then the other, which you may have sort of looked at, is the VMS records from the fisheries, and maybe somebody going back in and doing a bit of an AIS dig into that, because they're really incentivized to try to get close to those. Obviously, they also don't want to lose their gear, and there's this weird sort of standoff where maritime archaeologists generally don't want to, like, well, this is a shipwreck, we don't want to share it, and I think if we can kind of come to the table, so that they can have good coordinates to know where to avoid, but then also sort of maybe making that connection so they'll share those hangs, which might be really elucidating for finding new sites.
I really appreciate it. That was called the Master's Hang Log.
Master's Hang Log Van. Some of the names escaping me, so I'm trying to go back to my notes and see if I can find it. It was called the Master's Hang Log. Yeah.
I appreciate that. In Stellwagen Bank National Marine Sanctuary in particular, the policy for shipwreck protection has been non-disclosure. In fact, I had to sign an NDA before I was allowed to do any research on shipwrecks in the sanctuary, because I would obviously know their locations. So what we're finding is that strategy has unfortunately not worked. The assumption was that the major threat to all the shipwrecks in the sanctuary was looting by divers, when it turns out that it seems the major threat is actually interactions with the fishing community. So the sanctuary staff, I have to give credit to Ben Haskell, who's just retired. This was kind of his initiative. They launched a shipwreck avoidance pilot program where they released the coordinates of a small number of wrecks as a pilot study, and then asked fishermen on a voluntary basis to avoid those areas, and they set a particular radius around them. It seems at this point that the shipwreck avoidance program, at least the pilot version, has not worked as well as we wanted it to. What we're discovering through interviews with captains of fishing vessels is that the vast majority of fishermen avoid shipwrecks because they don't want to lose their nets. And there is a small proportion of that community that engages in that risk-taking behavior of getting as close to the shipwreck as possible. And it is that small sliver of the community that we need to reach the most. And so that's some of the work that we have ahead of us.
Time for one more quick question.
Can you tell us a little bit about your strategy to build trust with the fishermen?
Yeah, as I mentioned, this builds on momentum from a couple of different projects. So currently in Stellwagen, they have what's called the Stellwagen Mapping Initiative, which is actually chartering fishing vessels to assist in creating side scan sonar maps of the seafloor. And I can say from personal experience that anytime you're the lone scientist on a fishing vessel, conversation starts rolling. And so a lot of that foundational work has been done by my collaborator, Calvin Myers, as he's been going out with the sonar on the fishing vessels, and they just get to talking. And eventually, when the fishermen realize that our goal is not to take away their precious fishing sites, then they start being willing to share. And so thanks to that in-person engagement and that, going out in person on the fishing vessels, that's how we've been able to build that trust.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next presenter. Okay.
Okay, keeping it rolling here. We have Kevin O'Brien, who will be discussing ways to develop new detecting, cutting, and lifting technologies to increase the efficiency of derelict fishing gear removal.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Kevin O'Brien. I'm the president of a Hawaii-based nonprofit called the Papahanaumokuakea Marine Debris Project. This project is a large, multifaceted project, a hard tech research and development, hands-on hardware development project. So I apologize if I tried to cram in too much into my 8 minutes, but bear with me. I'd like to give a shout out to our wonderful partners at the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College program, who are our primary collaborators. Next. Our primary mission is to conduct large-scale marine debris removals from the Papahanaumokuakea Marine national monument. Next. This is this string of uninhabited islands and atolls that stretches for about 1,200 miles beyond the main populated Hawaiian Islands. Next. It's an incredibly important area of critical habitat for 7,000 species, many endangered species. Over 70% of all the United States coral reefs exist here, as well as 80% of the endangered Hawaiian monk seal population. Next. It's a bit like stepping back in time when you visit this place, because the wildlife may have never seen a human, and the abundance of wildlife, next, is just off the charts. And so when you have a situation like this, interactions with marine debris are very, very commonplace. Next. And next. And every day feels like National Geographic when we're here working. Next. By virtue of its unfortunate location in the middle of the North Pacific subtropical gyre, the accumulation of marine debris, particularly derelict fishing gear, is just off the charts. Next. So the shorelines can look like this, and next. And more importantly, the reefs look like this, choked with derelict fishing gear. In fact, it's estimated that 57 tons of derelict fishing gear accumulate annually just on the coral reefs in these islands. Obviously, the issue with this is an incredible entanglement risk for these endangered animals, which include the Hawaiian monk seal, the green sea turtle, and numerous seabird species, but also mortality to coral reefs as these nets smother and break the living coral. Next. Here's a typical atoll within Papahanaumokuakea, a central lagoon area with reticulated shallow reef structures that are just perfect for accumulating these derelict fishing nets. Here's one of our boats and some divers working on one of these nets in the water. So this is a pretty typical derelict fishing net here. They can weigh up to 10 tons and can be, 30 feet long, 6 feet across, and incredibly difficult to cut underwater. Also incredibly heavy and difficult to pull out of the water, and can be tangled hopelessly in living coral reefs. Next. This graph, red line is annual accumulation of 57 tons, and the yellow line is a backlog of accumulation that we're working to address, which at one point reached over 1 million pounds. But with the assistance of this grant, we're really hoping to trend that line downward by boosting the efficiency of our derelict fishing gear removals. Next. So time is money. Every hour that we spend on site in these remote islands costs us about $3,000. And so anytime we save in the detection of derelict fishing nets on the reef, in the cutting of these derelict fishing nets into smaller manageable pieces, and the lifting and extraction of these nets from the water, saves us a ton of time and gives us incredible yields in terms of efficiency. Next. Charter a 180-foot supply vessel and put together a team of 16 highly trained free divers and boat operators and head up into the National Monument for a month at a time. This year we did 90 days up there. Next. So hoping to address a problem here. The first problem for this grant is the detection, which is time consuming and energy consumptive. Currently, we just drop some swimmers in the water or tow divers behind the boat, and they swim or tow a search pattern. We're hoping to integrate diver propulsion vehicles or sea scooters, as well as drone surveys to be able to survey larger areas in shorter amounts of time. Next. We're putting together some data about detection of nets with drones. You can go ahead and go to the next one. Taking imagery at various altitudes and of nets at various depths. Next. As you can see, it looks a lot like the reef surrounding it. Next. And also collecting data regarding the efficacy of different wavelengths and different bands with our multispectral drone here to determine whether certain wavelengths allow these nets to pop essentially from the background and become more detectable. Next. This here is a vegetative index. As you can see, this big long line and a net on the end pops out against the background. We found that fairly effective. And next. Also the near infrared spectrum. We're very hopeful this will allow us to expand our surveys to areas that are not otherwise worth swim surveying. Next. We've also been integrating these DPVs into our swim surveys and have been collecting data about the boost to efficiency they provide. Next. Next. The second problem we're hoping to address with this grant, and we're less than a year into our R&D campaign here, so as you know, these things start slowly, but I think we're making tremendous progress, is that cutting these nets underwater is incredibly hard. We don't use scuba. We free dive and hold our breath for many reasons. But for us, developing a cutting tool, not only a manual handheld cutting tool that each of our divers can carry, but also a larger, potentially power tool that can cut the largest bundles of derelict fishing nets in minutes rather than hours. Very important to us. So we're developing tools. Next. Our first phase of this project starts with just simply testing what's already out there and finding out which blades or tools are already commercially available that we can then adapt to our particular use case. Next. This is a fun little video. We've been building some test rigs to be able to quantify the efficacy of these existing blades and be able to compare cutting speed, stroke length, etc. And then next, being able to quantify that and continue development. Next. We've also tested many other types of tools from various industries around the world. There's a bamboo cutter here and a cable cutter from the electrical industry. Next. And then also adapting existing tools. For instance, on the left is a standard benchtop bandsaw that we've adapted with a wire, an abrasive wire from the stone cutting industry, which we feel has great potential in being our magic bullet here for cutting these large bundles. So initial tests of adaptations of existing tools. Next. You can skip this one. This is an oil and gas industry tool that we hope to be able to essentially replicate for our particular use case, and we've begun development of this. Next. And the third issue is lifting these large masses of derelict fishing gear out of the water can be incredibly difficult. And so working to mitigate this problem, the cool thing is if we solve the cutting issue, we solve lifting because you're lifting smaller pieces. If we solve lifting, we solve the cutting issue because you can lift heavy pieces. So we have a really good chance, I think, of nailing this. And then obviously anything that we develop here will be provided open source to the global marine debris community to assist other groups in their removal efforts.
I apologize for interrupting. We're going to wrap up your next few slides. We're out of time.
Great, sounds good. If you have more questions about our R&D campaign, please see me afterwards.
We have time for questions now.
Really cool project and beautiful photos. So what do you, that's a lot of debris. So what do you do with it? I assume you retain it in Hawaii. Are you guys recycling it? What do you do with it once you get it back to the main islands?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we just hit our 1 million pound mark in the last 4 years. We removed 1 million pounds. Currently, we have 2 ways to get rid of it. There's a partnership with Covanta Energy called the Nets to Energy Partnership, and the marine debris is incinerated to generate electricity. And then secondly, we have another partnership here with Hawaii Pacific University and the Center for Marine Debris Research, and they've developed a recycling research center, which they'll talk about next, I believe, that we also give some of our marine debris to, and I'll let them talk about that.
I have the microphone here. That was a great project. I had a question. The time is money seems particularly important to consider here, and it seems like I would assume you have sort of deep and shallow and old and new and large and small. So how do you prioritize, given that you have a limited amount of time and a limited amount of team out there?
Yeah, we use a lot of historical data. We collect data on every net we find on the reef in terms of depth, location, net type, and all that. And so we have an incredible 25-year history. This used to be a federal NOAA-led project, and we have assumed responsibility of it from NOAA as a nonprofit. So we have a 25-year data set of where these nets end up accumulating, and we can target our efforts very strategically to hit the hot spots, which helps us out a lot.
Given that your collection method is based on free diving, is that depth limited? And if so, I'm curious what the distribution of debris looks like across depth and whether those shallow depths are the ones with the most dense debris.
Yeah, you know, this stuff ends up floating in from the open ocean. And so what we find is primarily between 0 and 30 feet. As a net washes in, it snags up on the coral. And as it becomes stationary, it can biofoul and grow heavier. And then it begins to sink, and it'll either plaster itself on the reef or tumble down the reef slope. But the majority of what we find is honestly 0 to 10 feet.
Thank you. That's all the time we have for questions.
Thank you.
Okay, to wrap up this session, we have Katherine Stevens, who will talk about Nets to Roads, innovative research to scale up removal and repurposing of derelict fishing gear.
Hi, my name is Katie Stevens. I'm speaking on behalf of Jen Lynch, who sends her aloha from Hawaii, as do all of our partners listed up here. Our project is called Nets to Infrastructure, previously Nets to Roads, quantifying and recycling ALDFG into Hawaii-made and used infrastructure. Next slide. So in Hawaii, I work for the Center for Marine Debris Research on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. We get a lot of marine debris, mainly coming from the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. This shows a 30-year average of the garbage patch as modeled by Nikolai Maximenko and Jan Hofner at the University of Hawaii. And a lot of the debris we get is coming from the garbage patch. Next slide. This is what some of it looks like, everything from micro and nanoplastics up to giant conglomerates of derelict fishing gear, mainly nets and lines with other debris tangled in. Next slide. It damages coral reefs. It can break and smother and kill the reefs. Next slide. I'm sure all of you know all the impacts of stuff like derelict fishing gear. These are some turtle bones that were found in some recent net events that we collected. Next slide. So today, with our partners, including PMDP, we remove about 200 metric tons per year of marine debris, and about 80% of that is derelict fishing gear. Next slide. And currently our options to, as Kevin just said, nets to energy, incineration on Oahu, burning that for electricity for the island of Oahu, and the other islands send it mostly to landfill. Next slide. So the Nets to Infrastructure project goal is to scale up the detection, removal, and recycling of all this debris into collecting it from around the Hawaiian Islands and recycling it into long-term infrastructure products. Next slide. So this is a 10-step project. I won't read through them now, I'll go through them in the next few slides, but through from detection to recycling, we also focus on research, education, and prevention. Next slide. The first step is detecting. As I said, Dr. Nikolai Maximenko and Jan Hofner at the University of Hawaii model the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. On the left is the location and concentration of the garbage patch in January of 2023. The Hawaiian Islands are circled in red. And then on the right is the model concentration of the garbage patch just last week, November of 2024. So you can see the yellow line is just a visual representation of the yellow, like higher concentration area of the garbage patch, and you can see how much closer it gets to Hawaii. And we do, with our cleanup partners on the other islands, we do see increases and decreases in debris washing ashore, depending on whether the garbage patch is closer or farther away. This was published in a paper by Berg et al. This year in Marine Pollution Bulletin, if you're interested in learning more about that. Next slide. Step 2 is to report. So this is our the result of the data we collected from all our partner organizations, and we worked with Dr. Wynne Cowger from the Moore Institute for Plastic Pollution Research into this material flow chart. Next slide. So 142 tons were removed in 2023. These just show the different islands and areas of the Hawaiian Islands. Next. About 80% of that was abandoned, lost, or discarded fishing gear. Next. And 97% was landfilled or incinerated, with only about 2 to 3% repurposed or reused for art or research and education purposes. Next slide. So these are, well, step 3 is remove. So these are our partner organizations and where they operate. So PMDP in the Northwest Hawaiian Islands. We work with the Surfrider Foundation on the island of Kauai, Center for Marine Debris Research on Oahu, and we work with the Hawaii Longline Association as well. And on Maui, we work with Sharkastics and then Hawaii Wildlife Fund on the Big Island of Hawaii. Next slide. Just a little shout out, this is my project, the Bounty Project on the island of Oahu. We work with the Hawaii Longline Association, which is 150 fishing vessels that go out into the ocean. So using these vessels of opportunity who are already out there, we pay them $1 per pound if they collect and bring back any derelict fishing gear that they see out there. This is a map of the removal locations, so where they're going out and finding debris. And as of last week, this project alone has removed over 30,000 kilograms of derelict fishing gear. Next slide. The next 2 steps are transport and store. So we have our partner organizations, they do their collections on their islands and store the debris until they have about a shipping container's worth. They send it to us, to our plastic recycling research facility on Oahu, where we receive, sort, and document the types of gear and marine debris. Next slide. So we sort by fishing gear type as well as by polymer. This is so we can try and source back the gear to the specific fisheries, as well as sort it into the plastic material for mechanical recycling. Next slide. So at our PERF, our Plastic Recycling Research Facility, we sort and document the gear, and we're hoping to mechanically recycle it into locally made, locally used, necessary, and long-term infrastructure products. Some we have been looking at so far are asphalt, concrete, and plastic lumber. So we have paved a section of road on Oahu with 1,000 pounds of HDPE trawl nets incorporated into the asphalt. This ends up being about 0.1% of the final pavement content, and that is replacing virgin plastic that is like generally put into asphalt. We have also sent 200 pounds of HDPE trawl nets to be trialed for plastic lumber. And this pile was actually from Kauai, but currently right now we have a pile that looks the same, which is what we got from PMDP that my colleagues are right now sorting through and documenting. Next slide. We also have sent 200 pounds of HDPE trawl nets to be trialed for a concrete forming system called spider ties, which would make building, housing and buildings quicker and cheaper. Next slide. And this is a very large project that takes a lot of collaboration. So thank you to all of our cleanup partners, other universities and institutes that help us, other organizations and businesses, and of course, Sea Grant and NOAA, thank you for the funding and for inviting me here to share our work. Thank you to everyone who has helped out on this project. Next slide. And feel free to email me or CMDR with any questions. This QR code goes to our newly updated website if you want to learn more about this project or our other work, and follow us on Instagram. Thank you.
We have time for questions.
Okay, we're a 3-season operation, and in the wintertime in Maine, it's not really conducive to do much work. Do you take volunteers by any chance?
Yes, always. We need lots of volunteers. Everyone should come visit and help us.
I'll be in touch.
Great, thank you.
Hi, thank you. I'm just wondering, were those recycling options local, or were you sending those off? Is that off island or?
Yes, so our goal is to have them be local eventually. Our problem right now is space. So we have the space to sort all the debris, but we don't have the space right now we have the money, but not the space to get the machinery that we would need to do the recycling. So currently we're sending them to the mainland to do the trialing. But if they work out, eventually the goal is to have them be on Hawaii.
Awesome. I was curious, I feel like you hear about how incinerators need a steady stream of waste to operate efficiently, and a lot of times they're not receiving that. Local governments have to pay them. So I was wondering if you've encountered any people not wanting you to stop sending waste to the incinerator?
So we do, if they don't meet a certain amount, the city and county does have to pay, I believe. So you'd think they wouldn't want to divert, but Jen Lynch, my boss, has met with people who work for, I guess, Covanta, the incineration plant, and they are interested in partnering with us to work on diverting some of this.
So I love the idea of recycling the materials into roads and construction, but is there concern about microplastics or chemical leaching from that?
So we had a trial road that was paved, not with our nets, but with just post-consumer recycled gear. That was 2 or 3 years ago, and we're working on testing microplastic and additive leaching. But as I said, this plastic would be replacing virgin plastic, so it's not like we're adding a new source to be like microplastic leaching. We haven't seen any like changes in any microplastics or additive leaching from it.
Katie, really cool project. Thanks for sharing. What are the barriers to having this kind of source like be the sort of permanent substitute to virgin plastic in road construction, both in Hawaii and elsewhere?
As I said, it only ends up being like a very tiny amount that we're replacing. And we have so much that we're sending to burn now. I don't know of an issue with it currently.
Is it that they need some virgin plastic still, or there's just not that much plastic mixed with the asphalt?
I see. That is not my project. Maybe I can talk to you after and direct you who you can ask that.
Great. Thank you, Katie. That's all the time we have for questions. I think now we're moving on to session 4. We're a little behind schedule. Thank you for your patience.
Okay, here we are at session 4, Action Through Alliances, how community coalitions drive marine debris prevention and removal. And our first speaker is actually going to be a recording, Eileen Nally with Pacific Islands Marine Debris Community Action Coalition.
Please bear with us as we get the sound working. We're going to come back to Eileen's video and move on to the next presenter.
Okay. Also from the Pacific Islands Marine Debris Community Action Coalition, we have Beth Polidoro.
Sorry, next we have Foam Free Lake Champlain Marine Debris Community Action Coalitions by Chris and Odd.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. So I'm Aude and this is Chris, and we are going to tell you about our marine debris community action coalition. This is a fairly new project. We started in September, so we're going to tell you about the early, we are on the early stages of the process. So it's called the Foam Free Lake Champlain, and I'm going to set the stage, and Chris is going to tell you about our goals for this project. Next slide, please. So Lake Champlain is located in between New York, Vermont, and Quebec, and as many places around the world, it's polluted with marine debris. And the marine debris that we're particularly interested in is foam, and there are several sources of foam in Lake Champlain. One of them is dock floats that include foam many times. And so the problem is when this foam is not protected, not encapsulated, then it can break down into smaller pieces that are very difficult to clean and get everywhere in Lake Champlain. And another issue comes from the disposable coolers that we use for fishing and things like that. And so next slide, please. As we look at foam in numbers, so I have a couple of images here. So if you look at the one to your left, this is the result of cleanup that was done in 2014 at several locations along Lake Champlain. And the numbers that you see here are number of particles of debris per cubic meter. What's most important in this figure is the relative abundance of the type of debris that we found. It's the Rosalia project and one of our partners for this coalition. And so as you can see in blue, it's the percent of foam pieces. In red, it's the percent of plastic pieces. And in gray, it's other types of debris. And you see that there are at least 3 locations where the blue, so the percentage of foam debris, is particularly high. And it's mostly, these places where the foam is higher, it's mostly very densely populated areas in Lake Champlain Basin. And the figure to your right is a graph from that summarize all the debris that were found between 2012 and 2023 on the Vermont side of Lake Champlain. And as you can see, if you look at the second to the top, microfoam is, we found quite a bit of microfoam. And there's also some large pieces of foam that we found in Lake Champlain. And so next slide, please. To address this issue of foam in Lake Champlain, we have started this coalition with 5 partners, and I'm going to spend a minute just tell you a little bit about each of them. So we have the Conservation Law Foundation. They engage in stewardship, they do water monitoring, and they are also working on legislation. We have the Lake Champlain Committee that engages in education and advocacy. We have the Rosalia Project that is doing a lot of education, a lot of cleanups. as well as they maintain a database of marine debris in Lake Champlain. We also have the Lake George Association that protects Lake George, which is the biggest lake that drains into Lake Champlain. And then last but not least, we have the Vermont Boat and Marine Association that works closely with Marina, which we know is sometimes a difficult audience to work with. So having this partner is helpful. And next, Chris is going to tell you a little bit about, if you go to the next slide, the different goals that we have for this project.
Thanks, Aude. We have 3 goals, and again, we just got started. So the first thing is to look to other organizations in the Lake Champlain watershed to see who may be interested in working with us and to assess what sorts of existing foam-focused educational resources exist. And we have been taking good notes of others of you here about other educational resources. We have beach cleanups that have started this fall and continuing to document areas where there's marine debris along the 2 lakes with our partners. We have a goal, like other organizations you've heard, to educate youth in the 2 areas that Aude showed on the Lake Champlain map. Next slide, please. We have the most disadvantaged populations. We have cultural communities, we have refugee communities, we have low-income communities. And so we're going to be working to provide education to disadvantaged youth and working with cultural community leaders to be sure we have reached different target audiences of youth to understand the source to see, in our case, a lake. And our third goal is to work with the users of the foam-based products. Next slide, please. To mitigate the marine debris. We're going to be looking at market alternatives. We're going to be looking at the drivers and the barriers to changing use of products from docks to coolers and so on. And we're going to be looking at developing outreach targeted to specific audiences through community-based social marketing to promote more use of sustainable practices. And we also have, again, Aude mentioned the Marina partners. And the last slide, please. And our goals include having outcomes that benefit both individuals and the lake. And we want to have improved ability of organizations to understand what products are out there and to be able to adopt new products and change the use of that source, as well as having a youth understand that those, what sources are and to minimize those sources and pathways. And that's all we have. Thank you. So there's a question in the back, kind of straight back from us.
Thank you for the presentation. I know you mentioned focusing on kind of marine specific foam products, but I'm curious if expanded polystyrene bans that exist in both New York and Vermont on packaging have worked. If you can see any signs of success from political programs like those.
A good question, and I think they're both very new, one of which just passed this summer, so we don't know. And one of the things I've jotted down while we're sitting here is making sure that we do collect kind of pre-data before we start doing education and outreach. And we have data, again, from the Rosalia Project and from the lake keepers, both in Lake George and Lake Champlain, to be able to assess kind of where we're at, and then we can see where we go. So to be determined is the answer.
In our research, we find out polystyrene, like EPA sources, polystyrene was dominant in the New York City tap waters. And right now we are still doing more research on that. And so one research also showing the Bronx River Alliance, they are actually collecting using the boomers and find out this EPS was 7% of the plastics of what they are collected. So I wonder whether you have done any research on your Lake Champlain about the water and what's actually in the water. Is that used dominantly in the water?
So we haven't, but there's a researcher, Danielle Garneau at SUNY Plattsburgh, and she's been looking at microplastics. So we know in the water, the number one microplastic is actually fibers. And I don't know for macroplastics. So fibers are number one. There's also a presence of nurdles, pre-production plastics. We think that has sources related to railroad traffic on the western shore of the lake, but that's still underway. So, but I don't know about macroplastic at all.
Even microplastic, because they're eventually going down to become smaller and smaller, right? Even goes to nanoplastics as well.
Yep. So fibers are the number one.
If you have a sample, probably we can help to identify that.
Okay, thank you.
How do you connect your youth education and the foam outreach? Because youth aren't necessarily buying like floats and coolers. So how does that work?
So the education piece for this project is going to be led by the Rosalia project. I think what the idea is, what they would like to do is using the foam as an example of how it gets to the lake, from what we use on land, how it gets there. So I think they're going to try to use this approach of how something that we use on our daily basis, like these coolers, how is it that they end up in our water? And that would be an example of how the watershed works. So I think the approach is going to be like how the watershed works, using the foam as something concrete that the kids can think about.
I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we're going to go back to Eileen's video for the Pacific Island Marine Debris Community Action Coalition.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for being here. My name is Eileen Nally. I'm representing Hawaii Sea Grant and a team of collaborators working on the Pacific Islands Marine Debris Community Action Coalition. And I know you've just heard about some amazing work happening in Hawaii, so I'm really excited to follow that up with some information about our Community Action Coalition project. So just to give you an idea of the scope of the area that we work in, Hawaii Sea Grant serves not only Hawaii specifically, but also American Samoa, the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, and Guam, which are all considered territories, as well as the Federated States of Micronesia and the Marshall Islands under the Compact of Free Association, and Palau. And so this is a really geopolitically complex, geographically, culturally, economically diverse region. And so it makes it a really exciting place to work, but also somewhat challenging, because the sort of paradigm of one size fits all models and solutions for marine debris and other issues really don't necessarily apply here, even though we're all Pacific Islands. So this is just to give you kind of an idea of the scale and scope of the area that we're working in. And because everyone here is so well versed in marine debris, I won't go on about sort of the problems. I think you're aware of them. So I'm just going to jump actually straight to the end goals. And so really the motivation for this project is to develop an analysis of interested parties and examine areas for overlap and networking to mitigate the impacts of marine debris in a coordinated, collaborative way. And as sort of an output of this, and something that can live on beyond the lifetime of this project, we're working towards developing a working group. And as this process has gone on, we've realized more and more that perhaps this makes sense to integrate with some sort of existing network like the Pacific Islands EPA, which holds a conference, or collaboration with Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, or the more recently developed Rapa Nui Declaration on Plastic Pollution. And so really the goal is to have some sort of working group addressing marine debris, plastic pollution collaboratively in the Pacific Islands in a way that extends beyond the lifetime of this project. But to get to these end goals, we really have to first do three things. And so first is identifying who even are the interested parties in the places that we're working. What are the organizations and agencies that are already working on this issue or might be interested? What are the resources that are available? What does the infrastructure and waste disposal system look like? And what's the personnel capacity? And then develop what we call a SWOT analysis for each location that really leans into the strengths, weaknesses, or I prefer to see these as challenges, opportunities, and threats. And I just want to say, I won't dwell on the threats for each case study that we'll step through specifically, because in the Pacific Islands in general, we're dealing with sort of a suite of existential threats related to climate change, freshwater access, and watershed transport of marine debris, though in some of our atolls and low-lying countries, the watershed transport is a bit different. So the first place that I'll just kind of give a case study of is Hawaii. I'm physically located there. You've just heard from the PMDP and CMDR groups about some of the incredible work that they're doing up in the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument, as well as in our Maine Hawaiian Islands to remove derelict fishing gear and repurpose it. And so we're really thrilled to be working with these partners. They're doing amazing work. And it's such an honor to be part of that team. And so when we think about Hawaii in this context of a Pacific Islands context, we can see the strengths as having stronger purchasing power. And this just means that for individuals who want to purchase plastic alternatives, these options are available and typically are something that people can afford. There's also really big, really large nonprofit engagement. So we have a ton of groups that are focused on debris removal, cleanups, and are really getting people engaged in the citizen science effort. We also have large research universities like the University of Hawaii, where I work, and this means there's the development of a lot of human capital, both in terms of volunteers, as well as the more academic and technical realm. And so these are really important assets that Hawaii can bring not only to support itself, but also the region in this effort. But in terms of challenges, we don't have any local EPA. We have externally sourced marine debris, so this makes it very difficult to manage if we're talking about derelict fishing gear coming in from elsewhere. And we also have under-supported infrastructure. And so the sort of issues aligned with waste management and transport of marine debris. While there's some links between islands, even within our state, we have a lot of diversity in terms of the specific problems, and what they may be facing on Hawaii Island or the Big Island is quite different than what we may face here on Oahu. And so that's something to consider. But an opportunity is that a big portion of our economy in Hawaii is based on tourism. And so if we really lean into an ecotourism model that doesn't accept or allow marine debris and says that this is not okay, plastic pollution is not okay, then we may be able to leverage that for opportunities to really have a lot of support to address these issues. And then, as I mentioned, the threats are sort of not unique to Hawaii in this case specifically, but sort of these more global threats that we face. If we go down south a little bit to American Samoa, we can think of a similar but different system. So in American Samoa, the EPA is actually, there's a local EPA, and they're working actively on marine debris. They're paying people to go out and pick up marine debris. So this is really positive in terms of their capacity to address this problem. There's less external waste coming in, but more local waste. However, there's really strong community leadership, which can really help galvanize and motivate communities to address this problem. But there's also unique funding opportunities. So American Samoa is not a U.S. state, it's a territory, so that makes it sort of in a different class. And so that has its opportunities and challenges. On the other side, it's a small area, so this can make it challenging to deal with problems, though in some ways maybe that's a benefit. There's limited purchasing power, so even if people want to buy plastic alternatives, they may not be available, as well as under-supported infrastructure. As you can see on the bottom right here, we have overflowing dumpsters right adjacent to the shoreline, and waste management is a big issue. in this area. And there's also limited human capital. While the EPA is paying people to go out and clean beaches, you don't see that same level of volunteerism and sort of nonprofit community engagement in beach cleanup efforts and stuff like that. However, there is a really unique opportunity that's already being taken advantage of in American Samoa, which is a partnership with Swire Shipping, which I'll talk more about in a minute. And there's also the opportunity, because of this strong community leadership, for family management of resources and really driving change on a family local level. And similar to Hawaii, they face the same types of sort of larger existential global climate change related threats that we do. If we go west a bit to the Marshall Islands, we're looking at a really different system geographically. This is a low-lying atoll nation. It's not a territory. It's under the Compact of Free Association with the United States. But the Marshall Islands does have an EPA present, though they don't really focus on marine debris. They have less external waste coming in and really strong community leadership again. So there's some strengths that can really be leveraged to support marine debris work moving forward. In terms of challenges, there are serious space constraints. This is a very, very narrow strip of land. As you can see in the bottom left here, we have an overflowing landfill that's been at capacity for some time, right on a shoreline with no barrier really between the two. There's limited purchasing power for folks who do want to get alternatives. They may not be available, and under-supported infrastructure. And the atoll geography makes it really difficult to come up with creative solutions to address this issue. However, perhaps they're eligible and can begin participating in something like the Swire Shipping Partnership that American Samoa is already participating in. And really, more than other places, as you can see on the right, the Marshall Islands are facing this really immediate threat of climate change. So with all of this in mind, we need to think about marine debris in the Pacific Islands in the context of equity. And so the UN has a push for turning off the tap and reducing plastic pollution and a circular economy. And this is all really important and something we absolutely need to be striving for. But we need to be thinking about how to link marine debris to ongoing UN Sustainable Development Goal efforts in the Pacific and consider just interventions that really account for the complexity of the situation. And this means while we're looking for common global solutions, we also need to be really mindful of the unique local context in which we're thinking of implementing them. And as an example that I mentioned earlier, Swire Shipping currently transports plastic waste from American Samoa to recycling facilities in other ports. And there's the opportunity for expansion of this effort. So how do we support this expansion in the places where we work? And what's needed to move forward? What's holding people back from being able to take advantage of these types of opportunities? And how can we really learn from the places that are succeeding and leverage that for those that need some assistance moving forward? And so this is the kind of exciting thing we're thinking about in terms of learning from one another. And a big part of what we do at Hawaii Sea Grant is communication and education. And so our Kapili Kai magazine is printed biannually, and we recently had a marine debris issue that highlighted not only the efforts and issues here in Hawaii, but also in the Pacific region. And on the right is a story about some of the work our collaborator and colleague on this, Beth Polidoro, is doing in American Samoa with plastics and marine debris. And we have more than 5,000 copies printed with an additional estimated 1,000 online readers. We've also done public engagement with the CMDR and PMDP with more than 100 attendees at Nerd Night Honolulu. We have a month-long public art installation with more than 250 attendees on our opening night. We have an artist in residence, events throughout the month, a youth art competition, and a local marine debris art competition. So we have a lot going on to really bring the public into this work, and we're excited to share that with you. So please send any questions to my email, and thanks again for listening.
Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker.
All right. For your patience all, to wrap up this session, we have Kate Goodwin with Oregon Coalition to Combat Marine Debris.
Okay, thank you so much. Again, my name's Kate Goodwin. I work with Oregon Sea Grant. I'm based in Newport at Hatfield Marine Science Center, and I and my colleague Tracy Cruz are co-PIs on this project, which involves lots of community partners from NGOs to government agencies to educators, formal and informal, city employees, county employees, lots of different folks coming together with scientists as well to combat marine debris together, youth and community coming together on this project. It's a prevention project. Next slide, please. So our objectives for this project are to increase teacher and student awareness of marine debris, as well as awareness among the general public about marine debris sources and impacts, and have groups working together with youth to work on problem solving to prevent marine debris, developing and implementing solutions. Next slide. And through this, we have 4 different activities that I kind of want to go through that are listed here at the bottom. And they go from engaging youth in K-12 programs, the teachers and the students, through classroom and out of classroom experiences to understand and prevent marine debris, as well as paid internship projects for high school students or undergraduate and graduate students through the next 2 projects. And then finally, a community activity that gets the whole community involved with lots of different organizations to help prevent marine debris. So next slide. I'm going to talk first about marine debris curriculum. Oregon Sea Grant shares and creates marine debris curriculum. And for example, there's one called the Marine Debris Interruptions. There are 3 full complete lesson plans available, and each focuses on a particular marine debris item that's commonly found on Oregon beaches that students may find themselves on a beach cleanup or interact with community groups that regularly do beach cleanups to learn about. And they trace the pathway of that material through its life cycle and find out how it's used, who uses it, why they're using it, and how it may have escaped into the environment and how they might develop solutions to interrupt this escape. So students become partners with adults to not only learn about the life cycle of the material, but to come up with engineering solutions or process solutions or outreach and education solutions. So it involves working with a lot of community partners to learn. Sometimes the material is, a water bottle, because you don't have to do one of these 3 materials. You might have your favorite marine debris item that a teacher would like to follow up on, but you can follow the same process. And some are like a little bit more mysterious, which is engaging for students to figure out what is this little piece of yellow rope all about. Next slide, please. To share the curriculum, we do teacher professional development workshops. So we're in our 2nd year of our project now. So over the past year, we've done 4 teacher professional development workshops, and it reached 84 educators thus far. And we model the activities, and we go outside in the field. And the curriculum doesn't have to be paired with outdoor experiences, although we'd love to be able to do that. It can be done for inland schools, so they can see that connection as well. Next slide, please. And then once the students are actually engaging in the activities, we help them, the teachers and the students, find community partners who can answer their questions about materials, access data about where it's being found, how it's being used, set up field experiences if they're able to do that. And so far we've had classrooms taking part in this material, after school groups, including Spanish speaking, outdoor school or after school group, outdoor school, and then summer camp. All taking this curriculum into their programs. This picture here is mostly from a summer camp program where they were investigating the yellow rope marine debris that were being found in Yaquina Bay in Oregon, and then working with local community partners to find out all about oyster farming and what kinds of solutions the kids could come up with, what the oyster farmer could help with, because we're all working towards the same goal of reducing marine debris and preventing it from even getting on the beach and the ocean to begin with. Next slide, please. The second program is Youth as Inventors. It's a high school internship program, so the students are paid. They apply and they're then accepted and paid to work on projects that first they have to interview people in the community about what they're seeing about marine debris. So that means people are collecting it from the beaches, rangers, municipal folks, waste haulers. and then take that information and come up with an engineering solution to address that problem. And so we had 12 students working on this last spring, and they came up with 3 different inventions. They get to go into the Hatfield Marine Science Center Innovation Lab and actually prototype their designs and then share it with the public through poster presentations and demonstrations. This kind of project can lead to future involvement in upscaling these projects. We have a student on a different topic who's started in high school and now he's in college, and his invention is being put out into the world and tested in real life, so it can really scale up. Next slide, please. And then the Oregon Applied Sustainability Experiences internship is for undergraduate and graduate students. It's a paid internship for the summer. It's a Oregon Sea Grant project that's ongoing with the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality under an EPA grant. And there were 10 interns this year. They're all tasked with being partnered with the host business and then helping that host business meeting its goals to increase environmental sustainability. So through our grant, we focused on funding 2 interns who specifically were partnering with their host organizations to reduce the potential of that organization producing marine debris. And so one was with an aquarium, the other was with the tourism industry on the Oregon coast. Both of them ended up really focusing on single-use plastics in those businesses and also installing washing machine filters to reduce microfibers into the environment. Next slide, please. And then each of these students at the end of their 10-week internship have to provide a report to their business, which is really helpful for the host business to be able to have somebody to like lay it out and do the research so they can start implementing some of these actions and make some changes. Next slide, please. And then our final project is getting whole environment community involved. We held our first repair fair last July. We invite people from the public to come and bring their broken items to Hatfield Marine Science Center during our day-long event. And we have recruited expert fixers from the community who have knowledge about sewing or bike repair or your iPhone and how it works. And you can come in and help get it fixed or even learn how to fix it yourself, promoting a culture of not throwing things away, but keeping things working, repairing them. And we had tablers from our partnering organizations to help talk about waste management. We had skills workshops to help people learn how to do visible mending, change their bike tires and so forth. So this is a great event. We're hoping to do that again in about a year from now. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to point out that this is a coalition, lots of partners. We have an advisory group that helps guide us as we come up with these projects, but they also are at the two-way street. They become our volunteers, they help share messages, they become resources for students who want to interview them to learn about the topics that they're working on. So it's a great partnership. Thank you very much. Any questions before our break?
Thank you for that, Kate. That's wonderful work. And I love the idea of a community repair fair. Question though, out of all the things that are broken or thrown away, how did you prioritize or connect to the expertise in the room? Did you, for example, think about the waste streams in the top tier of what gets thrown out that could potentially have a longer life? Anyways, I'm just curious.
Well, this is our first event, and we did not invent repair fairs or fix-it fairs. These are things that have happened in lots of other communities that we just wanted to see as much, find as much expertise in our community as we could. And so that's really where we started, is recruiting the volunteers to find out who could fix what so that we could appropriately market the activity to tell people what they should bring in, like should they bring in broken fabric, or should they bring in their car? No, they should not bring in their car. So to put some limits on it, and not everything could be fixed, but a lot of things were able to be fixed. And so we were trying to do as much as we could, and we kept thinking of new things. Oh, we should have somebody to be able to sharpen tools. That would be great. And there's a lot of folks in the community who want to replicate that kind of experience, maybe not do the whole 6-hour event that has everything and 30 volunteers, but maybe focus on, just fabric, for example, and do their own smaller workshop. So it's more of a just promoting the culture in general, that before you throw it out, think about like, wait, can I fix this? Because it's something that we used to do in the olden days, but just trying to get into that habit. I don't know if that answers your question.
Hi, great work. I've also trained high school students to help businesses reduce plastics, and it's been very challenging. So I was curious kind of what you do to train and equip them with this skill so that they've been able to produce amazing reports like that.
Yeah, the always that Work and Applied Sustainability Experiences project in particular, which is undergraduate, not high school, but similar, there's a whole orientation process for the students. And so they get a lot of information about from DEQ, and they learn about compostables and energy savings and life cycle analysis. So they're really well equipped. One side effect of having our 2 marine debris focused interns of these 10 was that all 10 of them got information about marine debris. So a lot of them started thinking about marine debris when they were going into whatever business they were. And they might have been focusing on like using less water, using less energy, but then they also saw opportunities to also reduce marine debris. So I think just having the resources that they could point to from DEQ that they could share then with their host businesses, like a third party kind of thing, was super helpful. And the host businesses who asked for interns to be with them, you know, they're already primed to want to do things, which is super helpful too. Now the matter is of having students talk to businesses that may not be ready to hear it. So we start with those who are ready to hear, and then they can be the examples for the other groups who want to be on board with these activities. Thank you.
Okay, if you can go to the next slide real quick. Thank you for bearing with us as we went through a little bit of some bumps, but that is our last talk from session 4. Next slide, please. So we were supposed to have a break, and we will. Instead of meeting at 10:30, we can reconvene in 10 minutes at 10:43. I'll see you all then. Thank you so much.
Want to get a photo by the flags? Oh, good. Katrina, do you mind grabbing a photo of us really fast?